Righto, now we're on to part 3 of guidance systems. In this part we're going to really dig into some of the problems that you might have with your guidance system, and I think this is really important because often a technician will get called when there's some sort of basic issues happening. So what I'm trying to do is help you understand a little bit about what sort of problems you might expect, and therefore once you've identified those problems you can really get to the solution quite quickly, and therefore you might not need to make that phone call to the technician, which can cost you a lot of money. So let's have a look at some of those key things that go wrong with guidance systems. A repeater, you've probably heard about repeaters, have you? So it's just to repeat that signal if you've got a difficult to reach spot or tree lines or something, or to bounce back that signal back to the other side of a hill. You can't use these to daisy chain across the countryside because if your tractor's operating here, it'll tell whether it's coming from the base or the repeater at the same time, and it'll sort out the strongest signal. But if you put 2 repeaters in there, it'll just go crazy. What we're seeing a lot of is people putting like base stations around like this to try and to be like a community base station network. This is what's happened in the sugar industry. The issue is if you're operating in the middle of all that, where Mr. X is there, you've got to know which base station you're talking to, which base station you set up your AB lines on, because one base station doesn't relate to the other in a lot of situations. If they've all been surveyed in, that's fine, but in reality a lot of them aren't. If you set up your AB lines based on this base station in the middle here, and then you went to one of these other base stations, your lines could be 2 or 3 metres out, because those stations only average their location for, say, 60 seconds to get a rough average of where they are, and then they work off the distance between you and the tractor. Okay, what normally goes wrong? The number one thing we see is just setup and tuning. That's got to be done, and it's very hard to get that right in a lot of cases. Sometimes, like we talked about earlier, about some machines don't track properly. So some certain implements that they never knew that they were tracking offset until they got a GPS system. They said, oh, this stupid GPS system doesn't drive straight. Well, it was actually the machine wasn't tracking straight in the first place. Often you can lose GPS contact. So like trees, sometimes you get low satellite numbers. You might hear this thing called solar flares or solar activity. It's becoming more of a problem. It's not a salesman's excuse or a technician's excuse for why your system's not working, but it actually is. It sounds good, doesn't it? And you need to know whether you've lost GPS or whether you've lost radio. Remember back to my original drawing, if you don't have the base station connection, that's going to be a completely different range of reasons why it's not working. Sometimes you get hardware, but mostly software. They come and do a software upgrade and it creates all these new problems. A bit like when you get your Windows upgrade, all of a sudden you've got problems, haven't you? And the thing that we're seeing more of is accidents, and that's a real concern. People having naps, going to sleep, leaving the alarms on and just having a sleep, and then turning it around and having another sleep again. It's fine for a while, but there's just lots of people ending up in trees, in gullies, across roads, through fences. Power lines, yeah. DOP, I don't know if anyone's heard of DOP. You'll hear that if you do have a RTK system, obviously being high accuracy, they're going to be far less tolerant to anything going wrong, right? A handheld GPS is always going to get your satellite in a position, isn't it? Always. Well, a high accuracy RTK can often lose signal, and sometimes because the satellites aren't aligned properly. So you might have 6 satellites and it still tells you can't auto steer, but you have a look at your DOP values and they've gone through the roof. So it's all about how well the spread is in the sky. Does that make sense? For you to get good triangulation, good correction. Also, these systems need to be terrain compensated. So most of the major brands now all terrain compensate. So when you're going up and over banks or whether you're rocking and rolling, you've got 3 metres of leverage that can make a huge difference on the steering. So they've got terrain compensation built in now. Some of them have got accelerometers, gyros, magnetometers, all sorts of things to really correct for that. But you need to calibrate that, and if you don't calibrate it properly, it drives like a hairy dog. So what should I buy? Obviously RTK. I think it's the best way to go. I wouldn't settle for the middle ground myself, but that's up to you. Make sure you buy something you can upgrade. If you do, just buy DGPS. But if you buy OmniStar HP, I think as a correction, I think you're still going to pay $1,500 or $1,800 a year in subscription fees. So the reason why most people buy an RTK is so they don't have to pay subscription fees. Definitely buy dual frequency. I've heard of there's 2 companies around that are selling single frequency, and one's selling it second hand and one's selling it brand new. Would stay well clear of anything single frequency. And what that means is you get 2 signals from the satellite, L1, L2, and there's more. But for this purpose, there's only L1 and L2. This is the civilian signal, what your handheld GPS picks up. This second signal is the high accuracy stuff. And the old single frequency ones used to just have that. So your startup times were 20 minutes, and you go under a tree and you'll wait another 20 minutes for it to pick up again. And it's just nowhere near as accurate either. Obviously, these L2 receivers are a lot more expensive, and that's why a good RTK costs money, because the receivers are really good. I talked about cores and GNSS. Make sure that they're GNSS compliant to pick up all the other satellite constellations that are coming. The EU's launching satellites, the Indians, Russians have got satellites up there, Japanese, they're all launching satellites. Yeah, the Russian one is, and it's called GLONASS. So there's USA equals GPS. Russia, the Russian satellites are called GLONASS. The Europeans are called Galileo. Leo. Don't know what the Indians and Chinese are called, but all of these combined are called GNSS. Righto? Does that make sense? Galileo, I think there's one satellite launched, but they're talking like, dozens of them. GLONASS.
Galileo, they use that for the weather too, or no?
No, these are all positionary satellites, as in positioning satellites, not imaging satellites. Yeah, 2 different things. And there's telecommunication satellites, a bit like what's your satellite phones, all that sort of stuff. No, your satellite phones. Yeah, like those, they have their own. Then they're geostationary telecommunication satellites. So there's all different types of sats, but these are all positioning satellites. And like a new Trimble receiver will pick up something like 80 different channels, which means 80 different satellites. So we're getting clogged up there, and it's going to get worse. There's some companies I've probably left out. Topcon Topcon's on there. So they're the main companies that are available in Australia. I guess go with the best support you can find. That's probably the message. And I can talk to you later about other things. I think they're all offer different things, so I'd be checking up each one that you want. And if you're green, well, you might like to go with John Deere's system if you're green. So
if you bought a brand new tractor, you're better off going with the JD one, or no?
Yeah, I think if you go with something that's already built into the tractor, because all the tractors now pretty well have their own inbuilt steering systems now.
Yeah, my tractor's got hydraulics and steering that set up for it from manufacturing, and I've got a John Deere monitor. I need a
What screen? Yep.
You got a green star.
Yeah.
What screen is the brown screen or the big one?
You'll need a proper green star, and the one you've just got.
Starfire.
Oh, you've got that in it. Oh, compatible.
Well, the monitor is
The big one.
Big one?
Yeah, it's new. I haven't used it yet. It's still in its case.
Right.
I haven't got it.
Because they're pretty well all the same. Like the one, the sprayer, tractor, and that. They're all
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I think mine's a spray start.
I think that's what
It's
it
got a
is.
heap of big buttons
Yeah,
on
I'm
it.
sure that's what it
And
is.
you got two of them.
Yeah, Green
together.
Star 2, GS2,
Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
GS2 screen.
So, you'd be mad to go to get a base station or go yeah, stuff like two when you can get something Coors compatible.
Yeah, well, John Deere will be Coors compatible in the future, I hope.
So it's not now.
That-
Not yet. Here's the thing.
For your hay work, you could still do sub, 15 centimetre.
Yeah,
Oh, that's good enough, is it?
Well, you could do.
Hay work as well, you want a straight run or something.
yeah. So I think with that,
Pass to pass, they're a bit out, but dead straight.
yeah, dead straight. And when, how old's the tractor then? New tractor, is it?
30, yeah.
6630.
6630.
Yeah,
2, 3,
yeah. As
Yeah,
it
2-year-old.
because those 6000 series they didn't have them plumbed in on standard. So you must have asked for a steering kit in it, did you?
What's that, the monitor?
No, the steering kit itself.
Yeah, it had an option to
You,
get it.
you ticked it?
GPS ready.
Good. Yeah, because most people don't tick that. And on the 6000 series, they're not. You have to go back and get that post factory
Okay,
fitted.
That's an option I took there.
Yeah, well the 7s and 8000s came out standard, but the 6000s didn't,
Yeah, no, but
from my understanding.